Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Friday, October the 4th, 2024. That makes this the news for Thursday, October the 3rd, day 954 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv. The peeps are coming in. Cindy is here. Kevin is here. Hey, Fitz. Hey, Cheyenne. Hey, Mel. Hey, Vanetta. How you guys doing tonight? Damood. Hey, Beltbat. Hey, Mike. Hey, Anthony. How you guys doing? Hey, Darlene. Mel's not doing great tonight. What's the matter, Mel? I'm not going live on YouTube. It's just a waste of time. It's just a waste of time. Hey, Colin. How you doing? Hey, Bobby. Dave the Wave. Hey, Rocco. Doing okay, Beltbat? We are under an air raid alert right now, guys. And air defense has been active the last 15 minutes or so. It's quiet now, thank God. So I don't know if that threat has ended. Hey, G2. Thanks, Red Fluid. One rose, huh? Hey, big spender. For those of you that don't know, a rose is equivalent to 1/10 of one American penny. So to send me a penny, you have to send 10 roses. Yeah, you're funny, Lars. You're very funny. Thanks, Red Fluid. Now Dave's going to send 10. 11. Big spender. Chef Deb, how's everybody doing? All right. So, ladies and gentlemen and other non-binary folks, how do you do? I am Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv. We are currently under a missile and drone attack. Air defense has been active in and around Kyiv. This is the 34th day in a row that the Russians have launched significant numbers of drones and missiles against Ukraine, including last night's missile and drone attack. There were 105 Shaheds sent in last night. And of that 105, 78 were intercepted. So that's an 80% interception rate on the part of the Air Force and Territorial Defense. Now, for its part, Russia claims to have shot down 113 drones last night, 25 of them over the Voronezh region. This is an estimate. This is now, look, the Russians sent 105 drones last night. It appears that the Ukrainians may have sent twice that. Somewhere between 170 and 200 drones inside of Russia, with the Russians claiming to have shot down 113 of them. This is a drone war. There's just no two ways about it. And the drones are flying back and forth over the border. An airfield in Voronezh was hit last night, right? So some of those drones got through. Some of those drones made it to their targets. The Boris-Oglebsk airfield, about 350 kilometers deep inside of Russia, about 210 miles from the Ukrainian border. Now, what was hit, according to the NASA firm's data? So you guys know NASA has this system. Keith, I don't know what you're talking about there. Can you confirm if Russia did drop the larger bomb, or is this fake? What bomb? What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Israel did hit a Russian ammo dump in Syria, yes. Guys, do me a favor and let me get through the news, and then we'll see about questions. Russia's been dropping big fab 9,000 kilograms, not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. What we do know is that NASA has something called the FIRMS data, right? It's real-time fire information. So if you got a forest fire raging in your country, you can look up on NASA the FIRMS data, and you can see kind of the dimensions of where that forest fire are. Well, the thing is, when the Ukrainians hit these big targets inside of Russia and they burst into flames and you have a fire that's 2 kilometers square, what happens is it shows up on the NASA FIRMS data. And if we look at the NASA FIRMS data for today for that Voronezh airfield, it appears that the ammunition storage warehouses, including the storage warehouses where the glide bombs are kept, Keith, are all on fire, along with the fuel storage, along with the hangars that contain the Su-34s and Su-35s, as well as the nearby SAM system that is there to protect the airport or the airbase from these kinds of aerial threats. And so it appears that last night's attack on the Voronezh airfield was another good strike by the Ukrainians, targeting aviation fuel, ammo depots, and where the glide bombs are kept that get mounted on those planes. It is a crime and a shame, I think, that the United States vice presidential debate did not even mention Ukraine. Didn't even mention it. And what we see in that vice presidential debate is the fact that Iran just happened to launch 200 ballistic missiles against the state of Israel right before the debate commenced is exemplary, or exemplifies for me, the way that the conflict in the Middle East is overshadowing and I don't want to say steals the thunder, but it takes the focus away from Ukraine every time. And it does not make sense. Because in terms of the long-term economic and geopolitical influences of these two conflicts, the one here in Ukraine has far more potential to destabilize our world, bring fascism back to Europe, destroy the transatlantic prosperity of the post-World War II world that we have all enjoyed, and threatens us all much more than the conflict in Israel does. The conflict in Israel is not going to destabilize a whole bunch of European markets and governments. That's not going to happen. Here, if Ukraine loses here to Russia, that's inevitable. Inevitable. Now, for the Ukrainians, for their part, not only did they hit that Voronezh airfield last night, they also took out a Nebo M $100 million radar installation. Now, the estimates vary on this. We think that the Russians had between 10 and 14 working Nebo radars at the start of the war. We know that the Ukrainians have taken out 4 of them, $400 million worth of advanced long-distance radar. This stuff can see 700 kilometers in, right? So from the farthest point from the Ukrainian border with Russia, it can map everything all the way to Kyiv. It's supposed to be able to pick up every drone in the sky. The real story with this Nebo radar, though, in my opinion, is not the fact that the Ukrainians took another one out, because they keep taking them out, right? The real story is that they are not telling us where it was when it was taken out by ballistic ATACMS. Now, the Russians know where it was. The Ukrainians know where it was. But they're keeping that information from us poor mortals, while at the same time saying this opens an air corridor for scalp and storm shadow strikes against Russian military infrastructure. What does that mean? Now, look, this thing either had to be in the temporarily occupied territories or it had to be in Russia. If it was in the temporarily occupied territories, why wouldn't Ukraine say that? Maybe they want jerks like me out there saying, oh, it couldn't have been in the temporarily occupied territories. It must have been in Russia. So this must mean that the Ukrainians have permission, and I hate to use that term, let's say authorization, that the Ukrainians have authorization to use Western weapons inside of Russia, when in fact they don't. And we have good reason to believe that they don't. Ben Hodges, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, was at the Warsaw Security Summit this past week, and he said that he had conversations, just today in an interview on Times Radio, which I cannot recommend enough to everybody, he said that he had conversations with senior administration officials, and according to him, there is unlikely to be any change in administration policy anytime soon. This is what Ben Hodges says, and Ben Hodges is a person to know. However, the idea that the Russians had a Nebo M inside of Ukraine is insane. Why would you have it that close to the front when you could have it on your own territory? It's got a 700-kilometer range. Anywhere inside of Russia, it can map most of Ukraine. So why have it there? It does not make sense. But the Ukrainians are saying they destroyed it with ATACMS. My money, I am hopeful that what this means is that the Ukrainians have received the green light for those long-range strikes. The rest of us mortals are probably not going to hear about it until the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting at Ramstein, which is coming up on the 12th of this month. So what is that? Just a week out or so. And that is a presidential level meeting. It's not defense ministers. It's not representatives of the government. President Biden will be there along with at least 50 other world leaders who support Ukraine as part of the Defense Contact Group. Regardless, a $100 million radar was taken out by ATACMS last night, and it makes me feel good. Where's Clay Fry? Is he here? He'll love this. So a crop duster. Guy is out dusting crops in the Tambov region, or the Tambov region of Russia. He's out doing his job dusting crops, and he flies too close to a gunpowder factory, and the guys on patrol there shoot his little plane up, shoot him in the leg, and take his plane down. And this is because the MOD, the Russian MOD, has given orders to shoot down any small Cessna-type aircraft that approach military targets. Don't try to figure out who they are. Don't try to figure out if it's a drone. Don't try to, just shoot it down. And this poor son of a bitch crop duster got shot down. Now, 2 weeks ago, we saw one, maybe two, small aircraft shot down over Murmansk for the same reason, right? Mistaken for Ukrainian drones. Why do I say one or two? It's unclear from the reporting whether there was just one aircraft that was taken out and the story got reported with slightly different details a second time, or if in fact they were two different planes. We don't have good clarity on that, given that there is no free press inside of Russia, right? Now, I've been trying to avoid looking down here at the chat because I want to stay on target. And I know there's going to be people down there asking about Iran and Israel and all of that. And this is a one issue channel, Ukraine. Ukraine takes 100% of my energy and time. However, it is worth pointing out that what we saw in the Iranian attack on Israel was far more missiles get through the air defense than had happened in the past. And we have to ask the question, why does it appear that Israel may have been throttling its response to the incoming missiles? And I think in listening to some analysts today, it occurs to me that one of the principal components of the air defense systems in Israel are in fact Patriots. Ukraine is increasingly dependent on Patriots for its air defense. What happens now? We know that Biden has said that all air defense production in the United States should prioritize Ukraine and should go to Ukraine first. But will the administration hold that line when Israel is in need of more Patriots? The fact that what I think about when I think about the strikes on Israel is I think about the Patriots that were expended and what that's going to mean for Ukraine getting more Patriot ammunition. Because there is a bottleneck in the pipeline. There is a bottleneck in the supply chain. And the fact that, common sense in crazy times, that raises another question, right? Common sense says we can use our planes to defend Israel, no need for Patriots, they have air superiority. Well, excuse me, then why aren't we doing that for Ukraine? If we can do it for Israel, why aren't the NATO member states that share borders with Ukraine, that are seeing drones and missiles land on their territory, take the lives of their people, why are they not stepping up and participating in this process? Common sense agrees with me. I like it. I like it a lot. We've already seen munitions redirected to Israel from Ukraine. Last October, right before Mike Johnson started his boycott that resulted in 7 months of no shipments to Ukraine, 155 millimeter ammunition that was meant for Ukraine was redirected to Israel because of the October 7th attack and a need for it on the ground. So we've seen it happen before. It is also important to recognize, I think, that the Russian prime minister was in Tehran the day before the missile strike on Israel. Now, I don't think that that's a coincidence. That seems to be an incredible coincidence to me, if that's a coincidence. It seems much more likely that Russia was there to coordinate activities with that strike. Now, the problem is for Russia, right, since this is a Ukraine-Russia channel, let's keep the focus on how these strikes affect Russia. The Russians saw a base in Syria hit, and that base purportedly had all the Russian munitions that were being funneled through Iran to Hezbollah. That's going to complicate things for everybody, right? Iran has lost its own missile reserves. The ammunition for Hezbollah is up in smoke, or maybe for Hamas too, although the location was in Syria. So Moscow is increasingly under pressure. And if Iran goes to war, how are they going to be able to continue to supply Russia with what it needs? Or are they suddenly going to be in a situation where those domestic products need to be redirected at Israel. We don't know. The Warsaw Security Forum wrapped up yesterday. This was held in Poland. The Polish President Duda announced that they would be spending 4.7% of GDP, not the federal budget, but the entire economy of the country, on defense. He reiterated his commitment to Ukraine, and he also called on Western partners to provide more assistance in a quick fashion, in a timely fashion to Ukraine without restriction, urging everybody to take the gloves off of the Ukrainians, as we all are hopeful that they will. The UK intelligence briefing today said that Russia has drawn troops away from Vovchansk, almost certainly limiting the group's ability or capabilities in the Vovchansk direction. Now, one of the things that we're seeing in Vovchansk was the capture of the aggregate plant by the Ukrainians, pushing the Russians back several blocks into northern Vovchansk. We saw we'll talk about that in the Frontline Update coming right up. Give me 1 second. With other international news, Latvia has deployed mobile combat groups and air defense forces and radars to the Russian border after a drone entered Latvian airspace and crashed in Latvia, on the territory of Latvia. Mark Rutte, the new Secretary General of NATO, visited Kyiv, making his first visit just 2 days after taking the job. His first visit outside of his home country to Ukraine, which clearly prioritizes Ukraine, puts Ukraine at the top of Mark Rutte's to-do list. And that is certainly nice to see. He reiterated that Ukraine's place is in NATO. He said the words, quote unquote, Ukraine is closer to NATO than ever before, end quote. He said, let me be crystal clear to the people of Ukraine and everyone watching. NATO stands with Ukraine, end quote. Which was certainly nice to hear from the new Secretary General of NATO. The new French far-right PM, so you guys remember that Macron called that emergency election back July 4th, and it resulted in certain wins for the far right, which is of concern to everybody. However, in his first official statements, Michel Barnier, the new PM, made strong statements in favor of continued support for Ukraine. Other key positions in the government that have been appointed by the far right are also known supporters of Ukraine, which is all good news. What we don't know is, will Macron's vision of France as a leader in this fight be something that the new government embraces, or will they simply maintain the status quo and keep sending what Ukraine needs, which is a win regardless of France's place in the fight? We are seeing huge failed armor attacks on the part of the Russians. So the Russians had abandoned these large armored column attacks about a year ago because they kept getting destroyed by drones. Well, it appears that they are back at it. And we saw another column of about 20 armored vehicles in the Kupiansk direction, utterly destroyed. In Vovchansk, we saw an armored column of a dozen BMPs, Soviet-era BMPs, come into northern Vovchansk And they were destroyed. All dozen were destroyed, along with about 100 soldiers that were in them or on them as they came into the contact line. It is worth pointing out that the Akhmat brigades are again active in Vovchansk as barrier troops. For those of you unfamiliar with barrier troops, what a barrier troop does is if you try to retreat, they shoot you. That's what Akhmat is doing in Ukraine. It's the heavy enforcer that if the Ukrainians don't take you out, they will take you out. This is how the Russian army is being run today. For its part, the Ukrainian armed forces confirmed today their withdrawal from Volodar and that the Russians now hold Volodar. Again, there's nothing strategic about Volodar. It's a little town. It had a pre-war population of 15,000. It's in the middle of nowhere. It is not a supply hub. And it cost the Russians an estimated 800 tanks and armored vehicles and an estimated 9 battalions of men over 31 months to take the town. 9 battalions. That's somewhere between 18,000 and 36,000 men. That's like the size of a small European army, right? It's insanity. It's complete insanity. In Kursk, in the Tetkino direction, that's the far, far west corner of Kursk, the Ukrainians have advanced and captured a little over 11 square kilometers in that area. Most of Ukraine is rural, Fitz. Most of Ukraine is rural. This is my favorite funny for the day. The Russians are claiming that they have retaken towns in Kursk that the Ukrainians never took. I mean, the systemic culture of lying about your wins in the Russian military is on display for everyone when they make these absurd claims. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Meanwhile, video of Russian forces looting Russian towns continues to emerge. So there's new video footage geolocated to just northwest of Sudza, where the Ukrainians are not, of Russian forces looting the homes of Russians who have fled, right, they're not there. In one case, the video is of the homeowner coming home to find the Russians in his house, his own people looting his home. But this is what the Russian military is. It is a Ponzi scheme of corruption, period. The Ukrainian Armed Forces spokesperson, Lieutenant General Havryluk, says that the ratio of artillery fired by Russia and Ukraine is down from 8-1, a high earlier this year, to 3-1. So where it has been that the Russians were firing 7, 8, 9, 10 shells for every one that the Ukrainians fired, they are now only firing 3. Now, Lieutenant General Havryluk did not give a reason, but we can imagine, based on how the Russian mill bloggers are complaining about shell hunger, we can imagine that this has something to do with the successful strikes by the Ukrainians on ammo dumps all over Western Russia over the past few weeks. Hopefully, this situation will only get worse, and the Russians will continue to run out of shells. We don't know any of the details except that fighter bomber, the pro-Kremlin, Kremlin-aligned, and Russian aerospace-aligned Telegram channel. Fighter bomber has reported the loss of an Su-25 and its pilot. Again, not, we don't have the details. We don't know what happened there. Just that fighter bomber has reported the loss. It is not unlikely. Now, again, training flights are very dangerous. Training fast jet pilots is a dangerous business. This was not a training plane, though. This was not a two-seater training plane. This was a one-seater fighter jet. But training is dangerous. Then there's the question of replacement parts. Right now, the Russians, we know, are cannibalizing half of the fleet to keep the other half in the air. Could it be that this was a technical malfunction caused by a lack of parts, a lack of maintenance? And many analysts are suggesting that that's the most likely cause. In the first half of 2024, Ukraine produced, are you ready for this? Ukraine produced 25 times more ammunition, artillery shells, and mortars as they did in 2022 entirely. They are on track to produce 50 times as much of their own ammunition this year than they were able to do in 2022. It's huge. The defense sector as a whole is now making up about 10% of the Ukrainian economy at about $20 billion. Ukraine claims that it can produce 2 times the number of drones, twice as many drones. One producer is providing 100,000 drones a month. A single producer of drones is producing 1.2 million of the potentially 4 million drones that Ukraine will produce this year alone. And that production is expected to go up, correct? We may have the first real evidence, solid evidence of the Chinese supporting the war effort with lethal aid. Chinese-made ZFB-05 infantry fighting vehicles have been spotted in Ukraine. So we have video of these Chinese-made ISVs in the fight in Ukraine. While the Chinese deny it, of course, the question becomes, where did the Russians get them if they didn't get them from the Chinese? Russia continues to try to disguise its drones as Ukrainian drones by putting Ukrainian markings on them. I mean, okay. In the temporarily occupied territory of Berdyansk, the former Ukrainian judge Vitaly Lomenko, who is wanted for treason in Ukraine, was found unalived following the explosion of his car. So to quote General Budanov, our enemies can run, but they cannot hide. We will find them everywhere. And that appears to be the case for this traitor. Russia is forced conscripting Ukrainians in Kherson into the Russian military. So the announcement has been made that Ukrainian men living in Kherson between the ages of 18 and 30, as of October 15th through the 30th, will be subject to mandatory conscription. This is, of course, a violation of the Geneva Convention. It is a war crime, and the Ukrainian government in Kyiv has objected vociferously to this tactic by the Russians. Russia made the claim that Ukraine has targeted the Kursk nuclear power plant. Ukraine denies this, and all of the video footage is taken in long shot from a distance. When we get up close, at least everything that's being shown on the Russian news, right? When you get up close to the plant, though, that's not where the smoke's coming from. The smoke's coming from a fire about 5 kilometers away from the plant. It's just a big fire. What that fire is unknown. What's amazing about this story is that every Russian TV news outlet ran the exact same story with the exact same video at the exact same time. So again, there's no independent journalism inside of Russia. Russian propagandists seized on the optics of this fire in relationship to the cursed nuclear power plant and made it a story, a fake story. It's fake news. South Korea has floated a $100 million loan to Ukraine, which is nice to see South Korea getting involved. The more that North Korea ramps up its support for Russia, I think the more we'll see South Korea ramp up support for Ukraine. USAID is coming through with $825 million for energy sector restoration. So I am hopeful that I will not freeze this winter here in my comfy little apartment. Switzerland has pledged $1.7 billion for reconstruction projects in Ukraine over the next 4 years. Romania has delivered its promised Patriot battery. Hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. That's according to War Monitor. So you guys know that, is Mr. Global here? Mr. Global, how do you do? What a pleasure it is to have you here, brother. Okay, so now look, we know that the Ukrainians had 3 Patriots. We think they got a 4th one. This would make number 5. The U.S. and our partners have promised at least an additional 3 that have not been delivered. If we could get the other 3, that would bring us to between 7 and 8, which is the minimum that Kyiv has said it needs to defend its airspace. The absolute minimum. Luxembourg, there's a lot of military aid today. It is amazing to me that here we are going on 3 years into this conflict, and the world still supports Ukraine in this fight. That should tell you something about how important this fight is. The people in the know understand that the security, the economic, military, and geopolitical security of the rules-based order that we are dependent upon for our prosperity is what's at stake here. Make no mistake. So Luxembourg has joined with Latvia to become the 17th country in the drone coalition. So you guys know the drone coalition is a collection of states that are they want to send 1 million drones to Ukraine. However, it's not charity. None of this is charity. This is all in our self-interest here. What do the members of the drone coalition get? They get real-time testing and feedback on their new breakthrough technologies. When we think about how important drones have become in this conflict, the idea that other nations can field test their emergent solutions and be part of a continuous feedback loop of real-time data, that's critically important to every manufacturer out there. Every nation interested in its own sovereignty and security should be interested in this program. Belgium will build and transfer 3 Caesar. Those are the self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine. Now that's in addition to, I want to say 73 that the French promised. The French promised 73 of these. And Spain has delivered a whole buttload of armored vehicles, which God knows Ukraine could use. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, other non-binary folks, honored guests, we'll go to Q&A right now, but real quick, let me just thank the sponsors of tonight's live. The board of directors, that's Bobby, Lars from Encino Tech, Dark Irish, who am I forgetting? Bobby, Dark Irish, Ballerina, Lars from Encino Tech, Is that everybody? I think that's everybody. God, I hope so. If I forgot somebody, remind me. I apologize. Let me send a big thank you to the moderator team, Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, Jay, and Travis. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server, and to and the Alexievich archive. And a big thank you to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps public groups on the Book of Faces. Okay. So, guys, I don't know if Mr. Global is still here, but if he is, I would invite him live. He is certainly a person who has things to say. And I'd be interested to hear if he's got anything to add to my comments on Iran and what's going on there, maybe from the perspective of target of oil infrastructure there and its effect on prices recently. Lars has hit 19,600 trolls in his database, which is unbelievable. Vanetta has put up there the link to our Google Doc share, which she manages. And that's where you can get our email message templates to Congress, the Senate, and the White House regarding Ukraine. Do you think the loss of the orcs would be abrupt or slow and more? I don't understand the question, Dusty. As compared to what? I don't get that. Richard, remind me where you are. That gas is $2.54 a gallon. Are you in West Texas? I want to say. Mike 2020, El Paso, Texas, $2.54 a gallon. Hearing that Ukraine successfully tested a new ballistic missile, homemade. Correct. This is the second time now that Zelensky has said they have successfully tested their own homegrown ballistic missile. Now, what does that mean? How close are they to producing it? You know, the fact that you tested a prototype doesn't mean you have a capability. However, if they've waited to report the testing until they were able to build some, that would be good news. But we don't know the answer to that. If all that they had were a couple of prototypes and they've tested them, we could be years away from the development of that as a capability. So we don't know. Would there be a game changer move by our brave defenders, or will it take longer with more losses? I don't see any immediate end to this conflict. I don't see that no matter what technology is brought to bear. Now, it could be, it could be sorry, I'm distracted by the chat. What we know for sure is that Russia cannot afford another 8 months of this. They can't. I didn't check the ruble today. Has anybody checked it? They simply cannot. They don't have the money. They cannot afford another 8 months of this. And that, I think, is just a fact. How can we accelerate it? Well, it seems to me, ruble's at 94.74. Ouch. That's a lot. How can we help to accelerate it? Well, we can give the Ukrainians permission for long-range strikes inside of Russia. That's the big thing that they need right now, and more ammo, more equipment, so that Zelensky can arm and equip these brigades that he says he has that he doesn't have any equipment for, right? If manpower shortage is not the problem, if it's an equipment shortage, get them equipment. That'll accelerate this decline. Use storm shadows on the remaining hardened storage bunkers and eliminate the strategic reserves of ammunition that are still in Western Russia. Force the Russians to pull more of the strategic reserve from the bunkers in the Far East, which takes time, and which puts it on a train, and that exposes it to drones, right? So all of that would be good for Ukraine. But look, there is no easy answer to this. Ukraine is going to continue to suffer and bleed until such time as Russia collapses in on itself. And I think that's a much more likely end to this war, the economic collapse of the Russian Federation, than a military victory on the battlefield for Ukraine. Larry Kemp has a question. Has Peter changed days? I'm only seeing every other day or so. I mean, yeah, Larry, that's true for the last 4 days, right? Because of some personal issues here. Mainly the lack of sleep. And last night, I just drifted off on the sofa. I woke up at 6 a.m. I couldn't believe it. But I'll tell you, these long nights with air defense going off do wear on you. They wear on you. There's just no two ways about it. And so yeah. So for the last few days, it has been shotgun. And I'm just back from a ban. That's true. Truthful says very hopefully, every time you see an announcement, that means it's already in production. I hope so. Mick agrees. He says that they're probably already on the assembly line. I hope you're right, guys. Didn't Ukraine receive obsolete rocket engines just recently? They did, Walter. They sure did. Now, I don't know that those rocket engines were obsolete, maybe by Western standards, but they did receive, gosh, I want to say 1,100 rocket engines. I forget from whom, the Canadians, maybe? But a bunch of rocket systems are coming in, or rocket engines are coming in. Are the Ukrainians using the Kursk area to launch deeper into Russia? Well, by definition, Walter, of course, because now suddenly 10 kilometers from the front line is 90 kilometers into Russia, right? So by definition, that's true. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Dusty. Okay. Questions, comments, points of observation, or personal need? Anything from anybody about anything? Did you mail your mail-in ballot yet? No, because I can drop it at the embassy. The embassy is a collection point. Is the land where Kursk is valuable? Well, it's Russia, so it's valuable to the Russians, and perhaps more so than some captured areas of Ukraine. But does it have... it's certainly valuable from a strategic perspective. 1/3 of all drones launched into Ukraine are launched from Kursk. Even now, still, 1/3. So eliminating those positions to launch drones would be very valuable for Ukraine. As I understand it, it's a kind of Rust Belt region. Heavy industry, a lot of rural, a lot of farms. A lot of boggy wetland, not very valuable at all. So that's about all I know about that. I don't know about Putin's personal fortune. I don't know that anybody really does. Any idea how many Americans are in Ukraine? I don't, Walter. I don't run into them often. I do not run into Americans on any kind of a regular basis. Commonly, if I do run into just a random American in the street, we will generally talk for a few minutes. Just about what we're doing here, who we are, where we come from, that kind of thing. And then that's it. I don't know how many Americans are in Ukraine. Is Ukraine capable of producing its own 155 millimeter shells? So, Robbo, my understanding is that there's a limited production of that right now. But that is supposed to change when Rheinmetall opens its Ukraine location. And their main product will be 155 millimeter shells. The energy infrastructure is not looking good, Ron, going into the winter. It's not. We all have very serious concerns about how we are going to stay warm. It is October 3rd. So we're 12 days out from when the heat should come on. Now, that might sound funny to Americans, but over here, the heat is centralized. So entire communities depend on a single thermal power plant for their heating. My understanding is that 80% of the thermal power plants in Ukraine were destroyed last year. The Lithuanians are packing up whole thermal power plants and shipping them to Ukraine because they had the same kind of plants at one time, but they've decommissioned them. So I think they had 18 on the grid that were decommissioned that they're tearing apart and sending every piece that they can here. I was in a region of Kyiv that I had not been in yesterday. And there was a thermal power plant that was in the process of being turned on. And so there's about a 2-week process of getting the thing up and running before it actually supplies heat to the community. But that power plant is getting up and running right now. And they anticipate having it online for the start of heating season, October 15th. How many of them that's not happening with is a great question to ask. And I'd like to know if it's happening with mine, because we're going to need heat before long. Has Russia stopped pontoon bridging lately? They have not. They continue to try to raise pontoon bridges over the same river with no luck. They keep getting blown up. Hey, Hobo, could Russia start making huge land grabs from Volodar? No. The front line has barely moved. In the one area where it has moved, or in the Avdiivka direction, it has only moved 50 kilometers in a year at the cost of tens of thousands of lives. The front line is not moving. The Russians are not making progress. It's a nominal progress. Is Russia putting up a better fight lately? I wouldn't say that they're putting up a better fight. I would say that they are desperately lashing out. And in so doing, they are running through their own supplies faster than they would be. And that's important because their strategic reserves have just been destroyed. That's important. That's a game, if anything's a game changer, that's a game changer. And it was done without Western weapons. It was done with ingenuity, brass balls, and homemade drones. I haven't taken any measures to keep warm yet, no. Ukraine electric grid is connected to the EU grid. When Ukraine has extra capacity, it sells it to Slovakia, Moldova, Poland, etc. It just doesn't have the capacity right now. Putin wants all of the Ukraine. Well, initially he said October 1st. He said he wanted the Ukrainians out of Kursk by October 1st. Then he changed it to between the 15th and the 30th. I got news for you. There's no way that the Russians are going to dislodge the Ukrainians from Russia before mud season comes. That means they're not going to be out of Kursk before the spring. Trump is done. Trump is unimportant. He's done. Well, yeah, if they're connected, the power runs both ways, Bobby. So, for example, that's how Kyiv is being powered, right, by electricity from Poland. Nicholas, I do not recommend mailing care packages to anybody in Kyiv. Stephen Barnes tried to mail me something. It got held up in customs and then was rejected and shipped back to him. And it cost the guy like $400. It's ridiculous. So I do not encourage, if you want to do something for your friends, send them cash. Richard, if that's true, there was some talk of that, wasn't there? That they were going to send 11 Patriot systems back to the U.S. and then maybe the U.S. would send them to Ukraine. But I don't think it happened, and now I think they need them. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with that. That's a great point, actually. Because if that's true, then that pinch in the supply chain would be far less concerning to the Ukrainians. It's a good point. Okay. Guys, it's just about 1 a.m. here. And so I just want to take a minute, in the last minute that we have, I just want to thank the sponsors of tonight's live, the board of directors, Ballerina, Bobby, Dark Irish, Jason Willis. I just want to thank the sponsors of tonight's live, the board of directors, Ballerina, Bobby, Dark Irish, Jason Willis Starin, and Lars from Encino Tech. Big thanks to the moderator team, best moderator team on the Tickety Talk. Big thanks to everybody here who keeps showing up for these lives, despite the fact that no one is seeing my videos. Everything is being completely suppressed. I'm not feeling like it, Robbo. I mean, well, let's not make it about me. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for being there for me. I got no sponsors for next week. So if anybody wants to sponsor a live, the PayPal is in the description. Sure do appreciate all of you. Thanks for being there for me. Because you are there for me, I can be here for you. Take care.